homeowner had a roof that passed inspection and yet it still failed. Most homeowners assume if it had passed inspection, then I'm protected, I'm done, I'll worry about my roof in the next 15, 30 years, whatever it may be. But that's not necessarily how roofing works in South Florida. And today I want to explain why roofs fail, even if they're approved. Most homeowners don't ask this out loud, but they're thinking, if my roof passed inspection, how did water still get inside my house? The honest answer, because inspections don't test your roof in hurricane conditions. They test the minimum code compliance, not long-term performance. So a lot of people think code compliance is a big thing, which it is. However, what I want a lot of people to think about and consider is code compliance is a minimum. At a minimum, you have to put studs at 16 inches on center. At minimum, you have spacing on windows from a corner to a mid-range. You have a certain amount of nails that are required in the field on a roof. Those are all minimums. That's just to pass. The big thing is we've had a lot of phone calls from homeowners saying that they did their roof a couple years ago and they're calling for repair. And my first question is, don't you have a warranty on that roof? And their response is, yeah, I can't really get in contact with them. I haven't been able to catch them. You're not just buying a roof, you're basically getting into a short-term marriage or a long-term marriage. You know, it could be a 5-10-year warranty. You want to make sure that the person or the company that you are getting married to on paper is actually going to be there throughout that contract. So here's what an inspection really is. An inspector is going to come to your home, check out a handful of visible items. If something is covered, they could ask you to remove them or get an engineering letter. That can also lead to, you know, some shady stuff depending on who you're dealing with here. We'll get into that in another video. So they'll come out, they'll confirm that the materials that they used are approved materials. They'll verify some fastening details. They'll make sure everything looks correct, and they'll sign off based off that snapshot in that day or in that time when they actually visited the property. They're not going to simulate 70-mile wind-driven rain. They're not going to do uplift tests over years of thermal expansion. They can't really do that, and it wouldn't make sense to do that. But they're not opening up flashing details after the fact. You know, they don't wait through 3 hurricane seasons to see how the roof is performed and to see what has failed. So if a roof leaks years later, it doesn't necessarily mean that the inspector missed anything. It just usually means that the roof itself was just built to pass an inspection, not necessarily to survive real conditions. So let's talk about how roofs actually fail, because it's almost never one big obvious mistake. It's usually a death by 1,000 small shortcuts, one nail placed too high, one flashing detail rushed, you have some underlayment seams that are not sealed correctly, you have a crew that's moving too fast to try to stay on schedule. Each one of these things by themselves, they seem minor, but when they all add up and then you put water into the mix, water doesn't need a big opening, it just needs one clear path, and once that water gets into the system and gravity finds its way, nature will do the rest. And here's the part that a lot of companies won't tell you. 2 roofs can look identical on the street, same shingles, same color, same permit card, everything is there, but underneath that, you have completely different systems. One roof is built as a storm system, the other is built as a checklist meeting minimum requirements. And more often than not, the checklist roof is cheaper because it's just designed to pass once. It's not really meant to perform for the long haul. Now, let's talk about the biggest lie in roofing: approved materials. So approved materials don't equal approved systems. You can have approved shingles, approved fasteners, and they can be installed in a way that still ends up failing, because roofing isn't just materials, it's sequencing. There's details, pressure zones, and at the end of the day, the execution is the most important. You can literally take the best window, the best roof, put it in the hands of the worst roofer and the worst window installer, and it'll perform worse than the worst window, worst roof materials installed by the best roofing and window installer, and you will have a completely different outcome. I would 10 times out of 10 bet my money on the better installers with the lower quality materials than the lower quality installers with the better quality materials. So especially in South Florida, this is why homeowners say things like, my roof is brand new, how is it leaking already? You know, it just passed inspection, and you know, the roofer is saying it's not their fault. It passed inspection, we already have water inside, and then their roofer is saying it's not their fault, and now you're, you know, as a homeowner, you're stuck in the middle. So what should homeowners actually be asking instead of did it pass inspection? The better questions are, before the contract is even signed, is how is water going to be managed at transitions? You know, what kind of nailing patterns are being used in these high wind zones? How are your penetrations sealed? You know, are they offering you different options for your pipe boots, for your valleys, you know, those common areas where we see most leaks? Or are they giving you the bare minimum, which is giving you the lowest price, which might sound attractive, but remember, this isn't a pair of shoes, this is your roof. You're going to want it to perform platform for the long haul. At the end of the day, if the difference between we call it the Miami Special versus the next system up, there's a couple $1,000s in difference. Wouldn't it make more sense to spend that initial couple thousand to prevent those repairs within the first 10 years versus saving it on the front end, but now you're going to spend that money later on the back end with the repairs? What about the damages? What about, the damages go beyond just financial. There's emotional consequences as well. You have to find a roofer. You got to do the repairs. Does that roofer show up? Do they do the repairs? Do the repairs actually take care of the problem? Are there interior damages? Is your family exposed to mold? There's a lot of things that happen. So I think at the end of the day, a lot of homeowners don't really consider when they see a cheaper price for a cheaper system. I know it's attractive, but is that really the best decision for you and your family in the long haul is a question that I pose to a lot of people. And once again, you should be asking these questions on the front end before you even sign that contract. What happens when hidden damage is discovered? Who's responsible when something goes wrong on the project? Those answers are going to matter far more than what you see signed on the permit card. And this is where most companies get uncomfortable because it forces them to talk about the process, not just the price. It'll force them to explain what are they doing differently, where they refuse to cut corners, what happens when conditions aren't perfect, and many can't because they're built for speed, not necessarily accountability. So at Bigfoot Windows and Roofing, we think about our name, our reputation, and how our product is going to last in the long haul. Somebody even recently, they asked us to install a 3-tab system, which, a 3-tab system wouldn't even hold up in a tropical storm here in South Florida. So you have somebody who's selling a house, you have a roofing company that wants to get the business for this person that's selling their house, but this person that's selling their house wants the absolute cheapest system. So this person wanted us to use that low tier shingle. And the thing is, what we have to consider as a company is, okay, this person sells their house. They don't care about the next person buying. I understand where they're coming from. Doesn't make it right, but I understand where they're coming from. The next person that moves into that home, they can easily see. They might even get a copy of the roofing contract. They might be able to pull the permit card and see the company that pulled the permit. So when this low quality roof is installed and fails a couple years down the line, who are they going to come back to? And what does that do to our reputation in the long haul? I would rather pass up that opportunity and hold a standard for my company. And that is far more important to me than collecting a check today. That's just how we operate. So we build roofs to survive South Florida's natural disasters. That means having system-based installations. We're not looking for shortcuts. We need correct fastening for real wind zones here that we experience in South Florida. We need to have proper flashing and proper waterproofing. We need to have a clean preparation and documentation based off our work. We're not having guesswork. And at the end of the day, because I'm a licensed general contractor, if we happen to run into structural issues on the roofing or the window side, we can handle that all in-house. We don't stop and say, oh, we need you to call someone who's a licensed general contractor. And that's one of the benefits of working with Bigfoot Windows and Roofing, because if we run into structural issues, we run into some rod or some framing problems, we don't stop and say, hey, we need you to call another professional. We can handle everything in-house. There's no finger pointing, there's no delays, no surprises later. In the case that you do hire a contractor who does not have the licensing to handle some of those structural issues, you now have to bring in a separate company, which then provides the opportunity for contractor A and contractor B to have disputes. Say there's a water leak, say there's a system failure. Now you as a homeowner hire 2 different individuals that you have to figure out who's responsible for what. If you're working with people that don't have a lot of integrity, it can be very hard to place blame on one or the other, which leaves you in a bad position where you're left with an incomplete project or ongoing issues with a project that you already completed. So here's the biggest takeaway for any homeowner that may be watching this. A pass inspection is the starting line, not the finish line. The real test is going to be the major storm, the second summer, the third year. That's when these shortcuts are going to start to show up. So whether you're replacing a roof now, you've already replaced a roof, or you have one that's new, here's what I want you to do. Ask your contractor to explain how their system performs after the inspection, not just how it gets approved. If they can't clearly dictate, if they can't clearly explain that, or they get defensive, that's definitely a big sign. And if you want a second opinion, or you want to understand what you're actually paying for, we're here to happily walk you through it. No pressure, no scare tactics, just clarity. Because at the end of the day, a roof isn't about shingles, it's about trust and relationships.